All right, go ahead, Kris.
All right. So hi, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Kris Bowers, and I am the Disability and Support Services Manager at Southwest Tech. Just a little bit about our college. Southwest Tech is located in Southwest Wisconsin, as you can imagine, in Fenimore, Wisconsin, very small town. We have over 80 programs, anything from ag to nursing, public safety, early childhood, business, IT. I believe, don't quote me on this, but we're the only public education that has midwifery. So that's kind of something unique about Southwest Tech. We also recently started a Charter Tech 360 program, which is also something that I'm really proud of at Southwest Tech. And so we offer technology packages to all of our program students who are taking at least 6 credits. So that means you get a laptop as part of your student fees, and then all the technology that you need for your program, as well as IT support, free IT support. So that's kind of cool. Not many technical colleges have housing, but Southwest Tech does. And Kris, I think we'll probably talk about Western's. We have apartment style housing. So you get your own bedroom and then you share a bathroom with one other student. So that's kind of cool. And then the other really neat, unique thing about our housing is our building trades program. Students actually build most of our housing, which is really, really kind of neat. We have really active student life. We have a golf team, a men's and women's golf team, an esports team, and a men and women's trap shooting team. Our trap shooting can brag. They are 2-time national champions. This last year, they won the national championship again. So that's kind of exciting. And I will say, as we're talking about technical colleges, the one thing that I think is really great about technical colleges is you can complete a program at any of the technical colleges in, some of our programs are 1 semester, some are 2 semesters, so 9 months or possibly 2 years. You graduate with relatively little debt, if any, and you come out with some really great paying jobs. And so that's something that I think is really cool about attending a technical college. So I'm going to turn it over to Kris to talk about Western Technical College.
All right, thanks, Kris. All right, Kris Follansbee. So we thought we'd make it easy for you. We're going to stick with the Kris theme tonight. So Western Technical College is in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and we have 5 regional campuses: Black River Falls, Independence, Boston, Tomah, Viroqua. And then we also have the Sparta Angelo campus, which houses our criminal justice and our fire protection. We have 100+ programs at Western. We also have a residence hall. Ours is a suite style. So there are 4 students in one room, and then there's in one suite, and then 2 per bedroom, and then a shared living room, bathroom, kitchen area. We also have esports. Our sports, other than that, are women's volleyball. We have men's and women's basketball, baseball. I do not think we have a golf team, so that I don't know that one. But a lot of our facilities have just gone through a referendum a few years ago, so very updated. The biggest thing I wanted to share, though, is tomorrow is open house. So that happens at our main campus as well as all of our regional campuses, where if you attend, you will get your name in a drawing for a $500 scholarship that can be used at Western. And you also have your application fee waived. So you don't have to pay $30. You get to put in your application. And even if you don't want to come, it's a really good deal for even thinking about coming to Western. I would go to one of the regionals or come to the La Crosse campus and get that taken care of. You can talk with instructors, take a tour of the buildings. It's kind of a nice way to check out Western and not have any obligations. So, all right, we will get started.
Okay, so just kind of talking a little bit about what we do, what Kris and I do. So we work with anyone who has a documented disability, and a documented disability under ADA is any physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more life activity. So I will say that the majority, but not all of the students that I work with are coming to me because maybe they had an IEP or a 504 plan in high school. We do have some students who are later diagnosed with disabilities, or maybe had a disability in high school, but just didn't receive services and decided that they needed services in high school, or excuse me, in college. And so what we do is we work with students to assist them in removing any barriers to their learning that might result because of their disability. We also help students navigate that transition to college. Maybe when you're coming for a tour, or you're coming to register for your classes, things like that. A lot of students will come and meet with us and just talk about that transition from high school to college. And then even when you get to the college level, we oftentimes will meet with students on a regular basis just to help them until they get their feet on the ground, kind of navigating like, how do you use Schoology, which is with our campus, we use Schoology. That's where all of your coursework and everything is located. I know Western uses a different program for their coursework, but we help you navigate that, how to connect with tutors, how to set up maybe a study schedule, things like that, just helping you with that transition. And the one thing that I think students really like about disability services compared to special education in the high school setting is we're a non-mandated service, meaning you get to choose kind of when and if you use your accommodations. You get to choose how much interaction you have with us. So you're really in the driver's seat. But with that, I always tell students it's really important to connect with us early and get your accommodations and those supports in place, even if you don't think you're going to need them, because once again, you're in the driver's seat. You get to pick and choose when you want to use them. So having them in place sooner rather than later is probably best practice.
I love that you mentioned that, Kris. That's one thing we always want to tell students, because they leave high school and they want to just like, I want to try this college thing without accommodations. And that's great. But just if you could just take the time, get set up, because you get to choose if you want the accommodations or not. So having them set up is great ahead of time, because then if you do start getting into the class and it's getting a little tougher, we can't go back. So accommodations are not retroactive. So they start from the day that you start wanting them and using them. So it's really a good thing to get set up, even if you're thinking, maybe not, maybe it's a good idea. Just come see us. We're really friendly. All right, so I'm going to move this because it's in my way here. So what we do, we promote equal access and educational opportunities for students with disabilities. Like I said, you have every right to the same education as everybody else, and that is what your accommodations can give you. It levels the playing field, does not give you an advantage. So it's a really good thing to make sure that you're looking into it and knowing what you're eligible for, because it's going to make things more of a level for with other students. So we will serve any student with a documented disability. We serve students really any kind of disability, and even temporary disability. So say you don't even know you're going to need accommodations. We will serve students in high school if maybe they got in a car accident, they have a concussion, or they have a broken arm and they need to get note taking and things. But there's always a possibility of getting accommodations. So for anybody else that you're working with or friends with, if they are questioning it, have them come see us. So we coordinate the academic accommodations with students and instructors for students with disabilities. So once you get your application filled in, which we'll talk about again later, you'll meet with us and we sit down and we find out what your barriers are. So helping that, knowing what your barriers are will help us to know which accommodations are going to be best for you, and will match and help you be most successful. We provide a testing location at Western. We have a little bit bigger than Southwest Tech. So we have 10 private testing rooms and then 12 more testing areas in our testing center. So we have a much larger student population. So I think that our testing is a little bit larger than Kris's at Southwest Tech. And then we coordinate access to other campus resources as well. Just like Kris talked about with her first slide, we definitely will do any kind of talks with our student life area. If there's some kind of a function coming up and they say somebody would need captions or an interpreter, we would make sure that the accommodations are set up for all areas. Oh, wrong one.
Okay, so a lot of times we get questions about what does it mean to have special education in high school versus disability services at the college level. And so many times students will share their IEPs with us from their K-12 setting, and we see things on there that we would call modifications. And we're not allowed to approve modifications at the college level. So modifications would kind of change the rigor and the standards of our courses. So things like if it's a multiple choice test and maybe in high school, your teacher would cut it back to 2 choices, or maybe if there's an essay assignment in high school, maybe your teacher would cut it back to, if all the other students had to write 4 pages, you only needed to write 1. Those are things that we're not allowed to do at the college level. We can do accommodations. And Kris is going to talk about some of the more common accommodations that we approve later on in this slideshow, but just kind of wanted you to think about, if you are a high school student, kind of looking at those things that are listed in the accommodation section of your IEP and thinking about, are those things that would be allowable at the college level, or are they modifications? And if they are modifications, they might be things that you want to start kind of backing off of during your later years of high school and trying to do your classes without them. Some other things like retakes and redos, we'll see that on IEPs quite often, where a student will come in and maybe if they get under a certain grade on a test, they can redo it. That's also not something that we are really allowed to do at the college level. So yeah, just kind of taking a look at those things on your IEP and thinking about, are those things that I would be able to have at the college level, and trying to back off. The other thing too is, we talked about that you're in the driver's seat when it comes to disability services. Sometimes in high school, your special ed teacher maybe is setting up your accommodations for you. That whole self-advocacy piece at the college level is really important, because you're in the driver's seat. You're going to be the one requesting those accommodations from your instructors and getting them set up with disability services. Now, we can help you with that as you transition to college, but most of our students, I would say, later in their first semester and definitely into their second semester, are taking care of a lot of that themselves with that self-advocacy piece. We never share your disability with your instructors. We're not allowed to do that. If that's something that you would like to do, share that with your instructors, you're more than welcome to. So that's kind of part of the self-advocacy piece as well. But some of that communication between you and your instructors is something that's kind of important to be practicing when you're in the high school level. Caseloads, we also talk to our students a lot. I was a high school special education teacher for many, many years. I had about 20 students on my caseload. Because Southwest Tech is a smaller school, I usually average about 100 students on my caseload at Southwest Tech. Kris, I know you have a much larger caseload. Yours is usually what, 300-400?
Yep, last year we had 425.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, we're not able to stay as on top of how you're doing in school as your special education teacher would be. And so, we're not going to know when you have a test coming up, and we may not know if you're failing a class. It's going to be your responsibility to let us know when you have a test coming up, or to reach out to us if you need any assistance, because maybe you're not doing as well as you think you should be and you need some extra assistance. Parent involvement is another big difference. Students usually love this. Because of something called FERPA, we cannot contact your parents without your permission. So there is a release form that you can sign for us to be able to talk to your parents. But I will tell you that if your parent reaches out to me, I typically, won't respond to them even with that FERPA on file, that FERPA release on file, without letting you know or copying you in on that email. So I really prefer to talk to the student as much as possible. And so, typically, like I said, if a parent reaches out to me, the student will usually know if that parent has reached out to me, and they'll be in part of that conversation of the return communication. Teaching assistants, some students coming to us from the high school have teaching assistants in some of their classes to help them. We don't have teaching assistants. It's just not something that happens at the college level. So that might be another accommodation that you have in high school that you kind of want to slowly back off on and take some of that responsibility and kind of track your assignments and things like that yourself. And then a lot of times too, I'll have students or parents ask about a resource room, a room that you can go to, a special education study hall of sorts. And we don't have that at the college level either, but we do have tutoring services at the college level. At Southwest Tech, we have tutors, full-time tutors that are available to any student, whether you're registered with disability services or not, and you would have access to them. And if that's something that we can help you set up, Our tutors will meet regularly with you or on an as-needed basis, whichever you prefer. That's something that we're happy to help you set up. And I'm assuming, Kris, do you want to talk a little bit about tutoring services at Western?
Yeah, so we have something that's called PALS. So it's kind of a tiered support system. And what we do is we make the referral, and then you will meet with somebody in the tutoring area, and they'll kind of decide, like, after talking with you, what kind of level of support you need. And it could be just something like you just want to come in and you want to get some study skills or some organization, and they can help you go through that. But then there's more in depth depending on, like they could meet with you 1, 2, 3 times a week. So it could be where you have something a little bit more like you would have in a resource room, but not quite as involved as that. But you can meet with them, and they'll do that over Zoom. They'll do it face to face. So that's one thing that COVID did bring. It helped definitely be able to do a lot more outreach instead of having to come into the campus. Another thing at college, I know at Western, we have a lot of areas where you can go and study on your own. So we have a lot of like little pod areas that are really nice, that you can kind of be alone and you can study, you can have that quiet. If that's something that's very distracting to you in big areas, and I'm sure that Southwest Tech has some neat areas as well. And then one other thing I just wanted to talk about real quick with the self-advocacy piece is that Western, we have a system that we use, it's called AIM, and you would have your own login and everything. And that's where you would go, you'll find every semester, you will choose which classes you want to have the accommodations that we have talked about in. So say you get testing and note taking, but in one class, I don't want a note taker, so you don't check that one for that class. So you are in control. We don't require you to go up to the instructor. We do just have you go in every semester. You check the accommodations you want and which classes you want, and then you okay those, and then they get sent to your instructor. So it's a little less scary, but it's definitely more self-advocacy that you need to make sure that you're taking care of that every semester. Okay, so as far as common accommodations, the biggest one that we provide, probably 90% of our students, are testing accommodations. So I already mentioned that we have private rooms and we have a testing center. So that will all kind of be dependent on your disability and which room you would need mostly. So it's distraction reduced in both of them. And then you'll get extended time depending on your disability. But I'd say 99.9% of our students get time and a half. And I'm not sure if it's any different for Kris. She could speak to that. And then alternative formatting. So if you need font in a larger size, then we would do that. If you need to have the test read to you, then we would put that through ReadSpeaker. We do not read tests anymore. As I mentioned before, we had 425 students last year, and there's only myself and 2 other staff in my office. So we definitely have gone to all text to speech of testing. And then low lighting. So in our testing rooms, you have control of how bright or dim you want it. We have lamps on the tables. We also have CDs. So if you need some calming music, lots of that, and then white noise machines as well. So alternative formats, that's going to be anything like electronic books. So if you listen better and you learn better from auditory, then getting an audiobook is a great thing. We just have students sign at the beginning of the semester that they will not share those, that they know that this is something that is only for them and you cannot give it to any other students. And then you also have to still purchase your own book. Because of copyright issues, we are not able to just give the electronic books to students. They do have to first purchase the print version or the online version, and then if it doesn't have audio. Large print, Kurzweil, so that is another system that we have at Western, but they do not have that at Southwest Tech, but it's mostly used in our office. It's not something that is put on any students' computers. And then ReadSpeaker. I know we both, Southwest Tech and Western, both have ReadSpeaker, and that is a really nice system that we started during COVID just because everything went online and there was so much more reading material for students. And ReadSpeaker it's right into our Blackboard system, so our learning management system, and it will read anything on Blackboard. And we also have text aid, so anything that is web version, you can also have read to you, which is super nice. And there are so many different things that you can change up in there. You can change the font size, the color, highlighting, the speed that it reads to you. And then there's also a translation feature, which I don't specifically work with ELL students, but a lot of students will take advantage of that translation feature, which is really nice. And then classroom recording and note taking. So both Southwest Tech and Western have smart pens, which are super cool if you haven't seen them. It's just a pen. It's a little bit thicker than a regular pen. And then you get a specific digital notepad that goes along with that. And when you start class, you just start it normal, but you press the record button and it will record the lecture. So everything that you're writing and the teacher is speaking is being recorded. And so when you go back to your dorm room at the end of the day, if you want to study your notes, you can turn it to page 5, click on that area, and the lecture starts in that very area. So if that was like the one area, instead of looking through all of your notes or trying to fast forward and rewind like you do on a regular tape recorder, or even on your phone if you were recording it, it's very specific and it really works well for that. At Western, we also have something called Glean. So that is a note-taking software that is on the computer. You can upload your PowerPoints to that, and it will sync that as well as the lecture. So that's a really nice system as well. You kind of get your choice of that. And then we also have note takers at Western. So we will pay our note takers to take notes for students who are just not really great at focusing and paying attention, or not really good at note taking, say they have the broken arm, or deaf and hard of hearing. It's very hard for them to watch an interpreter or watch captioning and take notes at the same time. So those are the main accommodations that we offer. Kris, was there anything you wanted to add?
I don't think so. No, that pretty much hit them all.
Okay, great.
So I already talked a little bit about accommodations that aren't allowed at the college level, and here's just a few more. As Kris mentioned, most of our students, when we approve for extended test taking time, we approve for what's called time and a half. So if everyone in your class gets an hour to take their test, you would get an hour and a half. Very rarely we might have somebody with double time. I don't think in my time working at Southwest Tech I've ever approved anyone for double time, and definitely not unlimited test taking time unless that's something that everyone else in your class gets. That wouldn't be something that would be approved. Extended time to complete assignments is on a very rare occasion. I do have some students, and Kris and I talked about this earlier, she has some as well, that have some episodic health conditions. So they're things that are unpredictable, where maybe they cause flare-ups and the student's unable to complete assignments during that flare-up. And maybe it's like once a month they have a flare-up or something like that. Then in that case, they might get extended time on assignments. Typically, when I approve extended time on assignments, though, it's not unlimited time. It might be a day or 2 days to get that done. Because if you have just extended time on everything and you can get it done when you get it done, we find that it just really piles up and it becomes very overwhelming. So yeah, if a student gets that extended time, it's very rare. It's usually for an episodic health condition, and it's usually for a very limited amount of time. Yeah, another common one that we see with students, that they could use all their notes and other resources during testing when they were in high school. And this is also something that doesn't get approved at the college level. It's sometimes students who maybe have traumatic brain injuries or something like that, that have some memory difficulties with memory, might get approved for something like a note card, but it would never be like unlimited use of resources. Now, there are some classes, we do have math classes at our college that allow use of notes. They're guided notes in their classes. And so, you know, if all the other students can use their notes, you can use your notes too, even if you're testing in our testing center. We talked about the permission to retake tests already. We kind of talked about the modified exams and assignments already. And then that last one, the excused absences because of a disability. Once again, a very rare occasion that would be approved. And it kind of comes back to those episodic health conditions again. You know, I can think of students that maybe really struggled with severe migraines. And so there might be an attendance accommodation because of that. But a lot of that goes back to, you know, what program you're in and what classes you're taking as well. You know, a good example would be our nursing students who are doing clinicals. Those clinicals are very scripted by this board that you have to complete so many hours and whatnot. And so, you know, sometimes that excused absences because of a health condition can even be difficult with that program, just because of all of the different requirements of the program. So, some of these are going to be dependent on what program you're taking and what classes you're in, because once again, we can't do anything that will fundamentally alter your courses and the rigor and standards of the courses.
That's a really good point, Kris. We have, so with ours, what we do is when we meet with our students to talk about this, it's not a decision that anybody in my office makes very easily, but when we do think that it might possibly be an accommodation, what we do is we actually send a form to the instructors that are in the courses, because there are some classes, like Kris said, that if they're lab settings and they're piling up, to miss is really, really challenging. But we have the instructors actually choose how many misses how many excused absences they could have, what kind of extension they get. And this is not going to be like, okay, yep, I've got extended time, so now I can have it on everything. It is only when you have that disability related reason. So it's really important to know that's to distinguish that difference. All right, so the accommodation request process. So I think everybody's going to have access to this later, but we could click on the link, but that's not necessary. So both of the links here will take you to, the top one is Southwest's accommodation request form, and then the bottom one is Western's, and they're both electronic. You fill them out. It's mainly, you just kind of talk about first you put in your demographic area or information. And then what's your disability? That's on Western. So you choose your primary disability and then what kind of accommodations you're requesting. I think Kris's is a little bit different. At Southwest Tech.
The same.
Okay, perfect. So you'll just put documentation of your disability. So with ours, once you finish requesting or putting everything in, you'll hit submit, and then another page pops up and it asks you to upload your documentation. Kris will talk about documentation next. But so you'll know what that is in a second. And then after that, what happens at Western is that generates our office to then send you an email, and that email will include a calendar link. So you will schedule, depending on the program, you'll either be meeting with myself. I'm mainly nursing high school students that are transitioning in to our Start College Now or taking classes while they're still in high school. And then so anything nursing related, CNA, all of those courses. And then there's a Christopher Koppus in our office who does a lot of the other. So it would be a calendar link to one of ours. And then next we'll talk about documentation.
And our accommodation request form is very similar to Kris's. You can upload the documentation right to the accommodation request form. And then I'm kind of I have an assistant who helps me with the implementation of the accommodations, but I'm kind of a one-person office. And so you get to meet with me when it's time to go through and talk about your accommodation request. So documentation kind of varies from college to college, but for the most part, it requires the same things. So at Southwest Tech, we take IEPs and 504 plans and educational evaluations from the school district, as long as your disability is learning related and the disability is stated specifically in that documentation. So for example, Susie has a learning disability in reading, would be kind of what we would be looking for. And then we ask for letters from medical providers when the disability is something that would be diagnosed by a medical person. So things like anxiety, depression, ADHD, physical conditions, chronic health conditions, those would all be things that we would ask for a letter from a doctor for. And so some of the things that we like to see in the IEP or even the doctor's letter is a diagnosis. What are those functional limitations? How does that disability impact your learning? Sometimes doctors or medical providers will put in some recommendations of what they think accommodations would be good for a student. I will tell you, sometimes we get those accommodations in letters from medical providers that we really can't do at the college level. So one thing to note is just because a medical provider writes it in a letter doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to have that accommodation at the college level, because sometimes it's just not allowable at the college level. And then we always, with the letter from the doctor, we ask that it be signed and on letterhead from that medical provider. So anything else with that, Kris?
Yeah, I was just going to add, so we have if students aren't sure, if they don't have an IEP or a 504 plan and they're not quite sure what they're supposed to get from their provider, we have a disability verification form that we can email to you, and you can take that to your provider and fill that out. And that's all, that would be all the information that we would need.
Nice. Yeah, and we just have a documentation requirements that students, and it outlines what the doctor needs to put on the letter, and they usually just take that and hand it to the medical provider, and it just outlines exactly what needs to be in the letter.
Perfect. All right. So what can you do to prepare? So understand what's in your IEP and your 504 plan. It is wonderful if you leave high school knowing what your disability is, how it impacts you, and your strengths and your weaknesses. You know, what kind of accommodations did you have in high school? I love when I could sit down with a student coming in and say, you know, what is your challenges? What kind of things do you feel are a little bit of a barrier, but what has helped you? What is the best thing that you had in high school that you would really like to carry on into college? And hopefully that's something, you know, that you know and that you're confident in, and we can have that conversation. Make sure you keep your disability documentation. If you learn one thing today, it's that make sure that your high school, when you leave, you take your IEP plan, your 504, whatever documentation you can get from high school, and you keep that in a safe place. Never get rid of it, because you never know when you're going to need it. So that's probably the biggest thing I'd like you to take away. And then Kris talked about this already, reducing or eliminating accommodations that won't be approved in college. So if you know you're not going to get unlimited time when you're a junior, start taking away and saying, okay, how would I do with time and a half on this? Or stop using those notes, because not everybody's going to get notes in college. And it's just a really nice way to slowly get used to the accommodations that you're going to have in college. And if you ever have questions, myself or Kris would be happy to meet with anybody to say, give you a quick, just if we really look at your IEP quickly and you have a conversation with us, we can probably pretty quickly tell you what kind of accommodations you would get. So if you have a question, feel free to call either one of us or email us. Develop and practice your self-management skills. So like those things that I talked about that they can help you with in the tutoring center. Organization, making sure you're keeping track of those assignments, you're attending class, you're meeting deadlines. The schedule at high school and college is very different. So a lot of times you'll go straight and you have classes constantly, but in college, like maybe you'll have, if you're in our applied our liberal arts or our liberal science, you will have classes like maybe one on a Monday and two on a Tuesday. And so it's going to be like, wow, I have a lot of free time. But remember that the time you have in the seat is very different, but that means that you're going to have more outside time. So know that just because your schedule is really light, you're going to have a lot more. They're expecting you to then take that home and make sure you're using the extra time that you would normally have had in high school and taking that and making sure you're studying. And then practice self-advocacy. Kris has talked about this already. Know your IEPs, be comfortable talking with faculty, and know that they're just like everybody else and they want you to be successful as much as you want to be successful. So don't ever be afraid to talk to faculty. Our faculty at Western, they love when students have that communication. They would never want you to feel like too scared to talk with them, because that's why they're there. And just remember, they're just human like everybody else. Kris, you want to add anything?
Yeah, the one thing that I always tell students too is if math is hard for you or writing is hard for you, take that class your senior year. I have so many students that come to me and, you know, as we're talking, they'll say, oh, math is really hard for me. And I'll say, okay, well, what did you take for math your senior year? Well, I didn't take math because math is hard for me. And so most of our programs require a math class and a writing class. And so, you know, avoiding it isn't going to make it easier. So nope. I always recommend, if it's hard, take the class your senior year, even if it's just a basic class, you know, that you can brush up on skills. Or, you know, we've had some students who have asked for our applied math book ahead of time, and they've worked with their special ed teacher and kind of worked through our curriculum ahead of time during their senior year, and maybe their resource room. That's another great option. We have a really great online math site that walks you through all of the curriculum for our applied math classes. And so, that's another resource that you could work through your senior year, but don't avoid those classes that are hard for you, because unfortunately they're not going to get easier in college.
They're not. That is a great point. All right, so that is all that we have. And here's our contact information, and we can give phone numbers as well. We can add that to the PowerPoint before we send that to you, Tim. So now it is time for questions. So I will stop sharing.
Well, thank you both so much. That was a lot of information. You guys are getting really good at this. I almost want to go back to college. Not quite yet, but that was I really appreciated the differentiation between high school and college and the focus on what you can do to prepare, because we're always encouraging students to look ahead and to build those skills, gain that knowledge, work on those attitudes before you become an adult. And this fits perfectly right into that. So thank you both so much. Feel free to unmute if you have a question or put it in the chat, and we will be more than happy to pass that question on to Kris and Kris.
Hello, my name is McKinney Triplett. I'm speaking on the behalf of my son, who he's not present right now. He's actually at work, but he is a junior currently, and I'm actually navigating the option for him to, attend at least a 2-year college. But I will say, we've had many conversations about it, because right now he's at the point where he has no idea what he wants to do after high school, and I'm telling him, time is ticking, so let's come up with a plan sooner than later. So his discouragement about attending a college after school, he's never been I'm gonna say, first of all, he does not have an IEP, and it's a really weird long story, so I won't share that right now, but he probably, I'm sure, more than likely needs one. He has a really hard time focusing, and he needs more one-on-one attention to kind of help him, with the steps of, catching on to certain things, especially math and science. So my concern is that, if there's no special accommodations for him, if he does attend college, like what if he, he tries to wean himself off of, the special accommodations now, but it just doesn't click for him once he's there, and then he fails the classes. How does that kind of go?
So I'll just mention real quick. So he is getting accommodations in high school, but does not have an IEP or any kind of documentation, anything?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I mean, that could be a conversation that we would have. So you think he has some kind of a disability, but just that high school hasn't?
Oh, he's been diagnosed. He has diagnosis, and he has support. He's actually involved in a lot of programs, the wraparound reach. So he has a lot of support, but like I say, it's a really weird and long story about, we actually applied for him to be reviewed for an IEP, and we went through the whole process, but they actually denied him the IEP. And the reason, in short form, of why he was denied is because when the spectators came into his classroom to kind of observe him, they said that they couldn't determine if he needed more support than his peers, because his peers were like really like his peers seemed close in comparison to him. Yeah. I don't want to say too much, but he's been kicked out of 5 schools. I'll say that. So the school that he was attending at the time was it was like an only option for us at that time. So
Okay.
I'll
So
say that.
he doesn't, students don't need to have an IEP or a 504 plan. As long as they have a diagnosis, that's all we need. So he would come to either Southwest Tech or Western Technical College, and we would sit down with him, look at the disability that he has, and then we would talk about accommodations that we think would be beneficial for him. One thing at Western, we do start a lot of our students out that are not quite sure, how they want to or how they're going to do. We have what's called a bundle course. So it's 12 credits. So they're still financial aid eligible because you have to have 12 credits to be full-time financial aid. You could do 6 credits and that would be part-time. But so it's 12 credits and it's your English and then a support course. So it's intro to college writing. And then we have psychology with a reading support course. So the teacher is actually has the support person embedded right in her class. And it's, so you'd say you'd go to psychology for 2 hours, and then the hour after that is going to be the support class. So that teacher is there for support. So it's a really, really good way for students to try out the technical college without just being thrown in. So they really do have a lot of support in that course. And that is always the way I want students to go if they're just not quite sure if they're going to be successful or if they want to do it.
Okay, gotcha. Appreciate that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. And I would say too, have him come tour and look at the various programs. I feel your pain. I have a senior and boy who has no idea what he wants to do, and we've been through the same exact thing. And we looked at we just came in. He spent some time at Southwest Tech and looked at some of the different programs. He's ultimately decided not to do a technical college, but I would really encourage your son to just come and tour and spend some time and check out some different programs to see if there's anything that's of interest to him.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I definitely will speak with him about that. I think that is a great first step, because that's the thing too. I think once he comes into an environment, if he sees that it's welcoming and he feels that it can be a good fit for him, then that will encourage him. My only concern though is once if he does decide to go that route and he gets in and there's limited accommodations as far as his learning abilities, and then he, like I say, he doesn't pass some classes. So if he does get, I'm saying this to say, if he's eligible for financial aid, he gets that, and then he fails classes, doesn't that jeopardize his financial aid if he's not passing classes?
Yeah, it can. You can go on financial
I'm just
aid.
trying to be proactive. I'm thinking ahead. Yeah.
Right. So it's not automatic. I mean, so he would be put on like a probation. So there's different steps. So it's first is probation and then it would be suspension. But there's also, we can have conversations. They would have to meet with an advisor and then they could develop an academic plan if he was getting in trouble in classes. And then he would have to follow that plan and then it could still be reinstated. He may have to sit out for a semester. There's so many variables. It's hard to talk about, but I would just say, I think one of the biggest things too is getting into the program that they want to get into, because it makes a world of difference. Students that come in, I kind of always feel like I love our Associate of Applied Science and Learning of Arts, because you can take all of your gen eds and then you can transfer to a 4-year college and you can start, at a much higher level and have paid much less of a fee. But I think our hands-on trades, if your son is into those at all, it's amazing the difference how students do when they come in and they are excited about what they're doing. They're not taking the history, the psychologies, the English. They're doing stuff, they're hands-on. I've seen just a huge difference. And our 2+2s don't ever look, always check out the 2+2s. My son did finance at Western for 2 years and is now just finishing up his senior year at Viterbo with a finance degree. Saved us a lot of money, which was really, really nice. So, but we've got, check out the programs.
And then
I appreciate that.
I was just going to quickly add to that. You said your son was a junior. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I'm slow moving. Yes, he's a junior right now.
That's So there are programs too that service agencies in the area between like Vernon County and Crawford County. The Western Wisconsin Workforce Development Board works in 8 counties in Western Wisconsin, and they do have a youth program that could potentially help with, you know, career exploration to help them narrow down what that focus looks like and what kind of area of interest that your son could be more interested in. And then that could be applied with, you know, touring either college and looking at what program they're going to find success in there. What do they have, the one that I want, that type of thing? What does it look like at their facility? You know, what that comfortability looks like for them. So they would have a career planner that would work with them in that capacity, that could help with it, that would then carry over to going to the university with them. So that would just be something that they could have as a community support.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Kris, thank you for extending your day, and Hannah, I know this is extending your day as well. So appreciate that. I will do my best to get the PowerPoint and short resource sheet out and to all the registrants, hopefully by the end of this week. But thank you all so very much for being here. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.